You're sitting alone in your room, the lights are off, and the faint glow of your phone screen lights up your face. But here's the question. Are you truly alone? Have you looked behind you? Don't think too hard about it, because after this story, you might never want to be alone again. Alex dropped his laptop on the desk and collapsed into his chair. The weight of the day bore down on him. Non-stop emails, impossible deadlines, and hours of sitting under harsh fluorescent lights. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes, trying to push away the exhaustion creeping into his body. The room was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of his laptop fan and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor beneath his chair. He glanced at the clock. It was 11:47 p.m. He hadn't meant to stay up this late, but he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had followed him home. He stretched his arms, yawning, and opened his laptop again, planning to unwind with a quick video before calling it a night. As the screen lit up, his reflection stared back at him. A tired man, dark circles under his eyes, his hair a mess. But something caught his eye. In the reflection, just over his shoulder, a shadow flickered. Alex froze. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the screen, trying to convince himself it was just a trick of the light. Slowly, he turned around. His breath caught in his throat. There was nothing there, just the same dimly lit room he had always known. He shook his head, laughing nervously. "Get it together, man," he muttered, brushing off the moment as his imagination playing tricks on him. But as he turned back to his laptop, the uneasy feeling returned. It felt like he was being watched. Alex's fingers hovered over the keyboard, and that's when it happened. The cursor on the screen began to move on its own. Alex's heart sank as he watched the cursor glide across the screen. It wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate. The cursor moved with eerie precision, opening a blank document as if someone invisible was sitting at his desk. He sat frozen, his mind racing. His first instinct was to unplug the mouse, but when he reached for it, the cursor stopped. It hovered in the middle of the screen, as though whatever was controlling it was watching him, waiting for his next move. Okay, Alex whispered to himself, trying to suppress the rising panic. He pressed the power button on his laptop, holding it down to force a shutdown. The screen went black, and he exhaled in relief. But then the laptop powered back on, not with the usual boot-up sequence. No, the screen flickered to life, displaying a single word in the center of the screen. Hello. Alex's blood ran cold. His fingers trembled as he slammed the laptop shut, cutting off the screen. He pushed his chair back and stood up, the wooden floor creaking beneath him. The room felt colder now, the kind of chill that seeped into his bones. He backed away from the desk, his eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. The shadows in the corners seemed darker, deeper. He could have sworn he heard a faint whisper, just at the edge of his hearing. And then, his phone vibrated. He snatched it off the desk, his heart pounding as he glanced at the screen. It was a message. No number, no contact name. Just a single message that read, "Don't turn around." Alex's breath caught in his throat. His hands shook as he gripped the phone tighter, his eyes glued to the screen. He didn't dare move. He didn't even blink. But in the silence of the room, he could hear it now, a faint, wet breathing sound coming from directly behind him. The breathing grew louder, slow and deliberate, each inhale dragging out as if savoring his fear. Alex stood frozen, his phone clutched in his trembling hand. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. "Don't turn around." The words echoed in his head like a command he couldn't disobey. But he had to know. Whatever was behind him, it couldn't be real, could it? He took a deep breath, forcing his body to stop shaking, and turned his head ever so slightly. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a figure barely illuminated by the faint glow of his laptop. It was tall and hunched, its limbs impossibly long, fingers nearly brushing the floor. Its face, or what should have been its face, was nothing but a black void, darker than the shadows themselves. But the worst part was its eyes. Two pinpricks of light burned where its eyes should have been, staring at him with an intensity that made his stomach churn. Alex's instinct screamed to run, but his body wouldn't listen. It was as if the figure had rooted him in place, holding him captive with its gaze. Slowly, the creature began to move, its head tilting to one side as if studying him, the way a predator sizes up its prey. Then, it spoke, not in words, but in a low, guttural noise that seemed to vibrate through the air, rattling in Alex's chest. The sound was incomprehensible, but he understood its meaning. It wasn't here by accident. It had come for him. The creature raised one of its spindly arms, its fingers extending unnaturally as it pointed at him. Alex stumbled back, the motion breaking the invisible hold the creature had on him. His survival instincts kicked in, and he bolted for the door. But the door wouldn't open. His hands fumbled with the knob, twisting and pulling, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, the creature's guttural noise turned into a low, raspy laugh. It was mocking him. Desperate, Alex grabbed a chair and hurled it at the window, but the glass didn't even crack. It was as if the room itself had trapped him, sealing him in with the thing that had come to claim him. The laughter grew louder, filling the room, until Alex pressed his hands over his ears to block it out. But then it stopped. Silence. Alex turned around slowly, his back pressed against the locked door. The creature was gone. The room was empty. The only sound the faint hum of his laptop, still sitting on the desk. For a brief moment, he thought it was over, that whatever nightmare he had stepped into had finally ended. And then, his laptop screen lit up again. A new message appeared, written in bold, blood-red letters. "You can't leave." Alex's chest heaved as panic surged through him. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of the creature, but it was still gone. The laptop screen glowed ominously in the dark, the words, "You can't leave," etched into his mind like a warning. With trembling hands, he approached the desk, against every instinct telling him to stay away. His eyes fixated on the screen as the cursor moved again, as if someone, or something, was typing. The new words appeared, one keystroke at a time. "You let it in." Alex's throat tightened. "Let what in?" he whispered, barely able to get the words out. His voice sounded foreign, like it didn't belong to him anymore. The cursor stopped moving, and for a moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of the laptop. Then, the screen flickered, and a new message appeared. "Look behind you." His blood turned to ice. Every muscle in his body locked up as his mind screamed at him to run, to escape, to do anything but turn around. Yet, the pull was undeniable. He had to know. With agonizing slowness, Alex turned his head over his shoulder. The creature was there, standing just inches away. Its void-like face was so close that Alex could feel the cold radiating off of it. The pinpricks of light where its eyes should have been burned brighter now, almost blinding. Its long, gnarled fingers twitched at its sides, as if itching to reach for him. Alex stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his chair. His breath came in shallow gasps as he pressed himself against the wall, desperate to put as much distance as possible between himself and the creature. What do you want?" he stammered, his voice shaking. The creature tilted its head again, the motion slow and deliberate, before raising one of its grotesque hands. Its fingers stretched unnaturally long, pointing directly at Alex's chest, and then, in a voice that sounded like nails scraping across metal, it spoke. "You." The word hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air out of his lungs. Alex's mind raced. What did it mean? Why him? What had he done to deserve this? The creature began to move toward him, each step slow but purposeful. Alex's hands scrambled against the wall, searching for anything he could use to defend himself, but there was nothing. The room felt smaller now, the shadows closing in, suffocating him. Just as the creature reached for him, Alex's phone vibrated again. He didn't want to look, but his eyes darted to the screen instinctively. A single message flashed across it: "Run." Without thinking, Alex ducked under the creature's outstretched arm and bolted for the door. This time, the knob turned and the door swung open. He didn't question it. He just ran. Out of the room, down the hallway, through the front door of his apartment, and into the cold, empty street outside. But as he stood there, panting and shivering in the night air, something didn't feel right. The streetlights were out. The city was silent. And behind him, from the open doorway of his apartment, came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Alex's heart raced as he stared at the glowing message on his laptop screen. The words seemed to pulse, each letter burning into his mind. "You can't leave." He stepped back, his breathing shallow and uneven. His phone buzzed again. With trembling hands, he raised it to see another message. "It's behind you." His breath hitched, and every nerve in his body screamed at him not to look. But against his better judgment, his head turned slowly. The creature was there, crouched just inches away from him. Its void-like face tilted unnaturally close to his, and those burning pinpricks of light where its eyes should have been bore into his soul. Its raspy breath sent chills crawling up his spine, and its long, skeletal fingers twitched as though ready to pounce. Alex screamed, stumbling back and tripping over the edge of his chair. He crashed to the floor, his phone flying out of his hand and sliding across the room. The creature didn't move. It just crouched there, watching him. "WH, what do you want from me?" Alex stammered, his voice breaking as tears welled in his eyes. The creature straightened, its impossibly tall form towering over him. It raised one finger and pointed at the laptop. The screen flickered, and another message appeared: "Open it." Alex shook his head violently. No, I'm not doing anything you want." The room instantly grew colder. The lights flickered, and the creature's guttural laugh filled the air again, louder this time, shaking the very walls. Its shadow stretched across the room, swallowing the dim light as it loomed over Alex. "Open it," the screen demanded again, the words flashing in rapid succession. With no other options, Alex crawled toward the desk, his hands shaking as he reached for the laptop. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. But the creature's breath was on his neck now, its presence suffocating. He opened the laptop. The screen instantly filled with a video feed. It took Alex a moment to realize what he was looking at. It was his own room, his desk, his chair, his window, but the angle was all wrong. It wasn't being filmed from inside. It was being filmed from outside. And then the camera moved. Slowly, it panned across the window and stopped, zooming in on Alex's face as he sat there. His blood turned to ice. Alex's gaze darted to the window, but it was pitch black outside. He couldn't see anything. His reflection stared back at him, wide-eyed and trembling. But on the video feed, something moved. A hand, long, pale, and clawed. It reached up and pressed against the glass in the video. Alex jumped back from the desk, his heart hammering in his chest. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself, his voice cracking. "This can't be real." But the hand on the screen didn't stop. It dragged its claws down the glass, the sound of nails scraping against a surface filling the room. Alex covered his ears, but the sound wasn't just in his ears. It was in his head, reverberating like an endless scream. Suddenly, the video feed cut out, replaced by a single line of text. "It's already inside." Alex froze, his breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he turned to face the room, his eyes darting to every corner. But it was empty. The creature was gone. The sound of creaking would broke the silence, coming from above. Alex looked up, his eyes locking on the attic door. It was slightly ajar, the old ladder leading down into his room. He didn't remember opening it. A low, guttural growl echoed from the dark space above, and Alex's blood ran cold. He stumbled back, his mind screaming for him to run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The growl grew louder, deeper, as something began to descend the ladder. First, a hand, those same long, clawed fingers gripping the edge of the ladder. Then another hand, followed by a face that made Alex's stomach turn. It was his own face, twisted, hollow, with those burning eyes staring straight at him. The thing stepped down slowly, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet with broken strings. Alex backed into the wall, his chest heaving as he tried to find a way out. "Stay away," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You're not real." The creature grinned, its mouth stretching unnaturally wide. And then it spoke, in a voice that sounded like his own, layered with something much darker. "I am real, and now I'm you." The lights in the room flickered one last time before everything went dark. The room was completely dark now, except for the faint glow of Alex's laptop. The creature, his twisted doppelganger, took a slow, deliberate step toward him, its hollow, burning eyes locked on his trembling form. Alex scrambled along the wall, desperately feeling for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers brushed against a metal lamp, and with all the strength he could muster, he yanked it from the table and swung it. The creature didn't flinch. The lamp passed straight through its body as though it were made of smoke, hitting the floor with a loud crash. Alex stared in disbelief, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "You can't fight me," the creature said, its voice an unsettling mix of Alex's own and something ancient, something malevolent. "I'm not just in your house. I'm in you." "No," Alex shouted, his voice cracking. "You're lying." The creature smiled, its mouth stretching impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. It raised one clawed hand and pointed directly at Alex's chest. Suddenly, Alex felt it, a searing pain in his chest, as if something was clawing its way out from the inside. He doubled over, clutching his shirt, his screams echoing through the empty room. What are you doing to me?" he choked out, tears streaming down his face. The creature tilted its head, watching him writhe in agony. "I told you," it said, stepping closer. "You can't leave. You brought me here, and now you'll never be rid of me." Alex's mind raced. Brought it here? What does it mean? He thought back to earlier that night, his endless scrolling through forums, clicking on strange links, watching unsettling videos out of boredom. One video in particular stood out, a grainy, cursed clip with a warning in its description. "Do not watch this alone. Do not watch past midnight." His heart sank as he realized the truth. He had invited it in. The pain in his chest grew unbearable, and he collapsed to the floor, his vision blurring. He felt cold fingers brush against his forehead, and when he looked up, the creature was crouched in front of him. Its burning eyes were inches from his. "Don't fight it," it whispered. "You'll feel better when you let go." Alex screamed, thrashing against the invisible force holding him down. He wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. With every ounce of strength he had left, he reached for his phone, lying just out of reach on the floor. If he could just call someone, anyone, maybe he could break whatever curse had latched onto him. But as his fingers grazed the edge of the phone, the creature's hand slammed down on it, shattering the screen. "No one can save you," it said, its grin widening. "You belong to me now." Alex's vision blurred as he struggled against the overwhelming darkness pressing down on him. The creature loomed closer, its jagged smile frozen in place. Its voice, cold and resonant, filled the room. "You think someone can save you? Look around, Alex. You're alone. You've always been alone." The words struck something deep within Alex. Memories of sleepless nights, of isolating himself from friends and family, of drowning in endless work to avoid facing the emptiness inside. The creature wasn't just mocking him. It knew him. "No," Alex muttered, shaking his head as he tried to push the thoughts away. "You don't know me. You're not real." The creature let out a guttural laugh, crouching down until its face was inches from Alex's. "Oh, but I am real. I'm the voice you've ignored, the fear you've buried, the shadow that follows you everywhere. I'm the part of you that you refuse to face." The room began to spin, the walls warping and twisting as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Alex pressed his hands to his ears, trying to block out the creature's voice, but it only grew louder. "Don't you see? You can't fight me because I am you." "No," Alex shouted, forcing himself to his feet despite the crushing weight on his chest. "You're not me. You're just a nightmare." The creature's grin faltered for the first time, its hollow eyes narrowing. "A nightmare?" it hissed. "Let's see if you're still saying that when you can't wake up." Before Alex could react, the creature lunged at him. Its clawed hand pierced through his chest, not physically, but in a way that felt much worse. It wasn't attacking his body. It was attacking his mind, his very soul. Alex screamed as his vision was consumed by darkness. Images flashed before his eyes. His childhood home, the faces of loved ones he hadn't seen in years, the countless nights he'd spent staring at his ceiling, wishing for something, anything, to make him feel alive again. The creature's voice echoed in the void. "You invited me in because you wanted to feel something. And now, I'll make sure you never feel anything again." Alex's knees buckled, and he fell to the floor. The darkness around him began to solidify, closing in like a suffocating fog. His breathing slowed, and for a moment, he felt as though he was sinking into a deep, endless abyss. But then, a faint light appeared. It was small, flickering like a dying flame, but it was enough to snap Alex out of his spiral. He focused on it, reaching toward it with everything he had left. The creature growled, its grip on him tightening as it tried to drag him back into the void. "You can't escape me," it roared. Alex clenched his fists, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "You're right, I can't escape you, but I can fight you." With a final surge of strength, Alex reached for the light, letting it fill him. The darkness recoiled, and the creature let out an ear-piercing scream as its form began to dissolve. The room around Alex flickered and warped before snapping back into place. He was back in his room, the creature nowhere to be seen. Alex collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. The faint glow of his laptop illuminated the room, now eerily silent. But he knew it wasn't over. The cursed presence wasn't gone. It was inside him, waiting, and Alex knew that as long as he lived, he would have to fight it. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by Alex's labored breathing. His chest heaved as he sat slumped against the wall, staring at the faint glow of his laptop. For a moment, he thought it was finally over, but deep down, he knew the truth. He stood shakily, his legs weak beneath him, and approached the laptop. The screen was black, the ominous messages gone. Tentatively, he pressed the power button. It flickered to life, the familiar startup sound bringing a sliver of comfort. Nothing seemed out of place. No cryptic messages, no video feeds, just his usual desktop. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Maybe it really was gone. His phone buzzed from across the room, startling him. He hesitated before picking it up. The shattered screen still worked, and there was a single notification. "Unknown number, see you soon." Alex's stomach turned, but he forced himself to stay calm. He deleted the message, convincing himself it was just a lingering trace of whatever had haunted him. Days passed, then weeks. Alex tried to return to normal, but normal felt distant, unreachable. Every shadow seemed too dark, every creak in the floor too deliberate. Sleep became a rare luxury. He avoided his laptop as much as he could, using it only when absolutely necessary. But the nights were the worst. No matter how many lights he left on, the room always felt darker after midnight. He kept hearing faint whispers, too quiet to understand but loud enough to keep him on edge. One night, as Alex lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his laptop powered on by itself. The sound jolted him upright. He stared at the glowing screen, his heart pounding. Slowly, he got out of bed and approached it, his feet dragging as though he were walking through water. On the screen was a single message: "You can't fight forever." Alex's chest tightened, and a cold sweat broke out across his body. He slammed the laptop shut and threw it across the room. The crash echoed, but the screen remained eerily intact, the glow still visible through the cracks. "Leave me alone!" he screamed into the empty room, his voice trembling. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The shadows in the corners seemed to grow darker, shifting and twisting as though alive. The guttural laughter returned, faint at first but growing louder, surrounding him. Alex clenched his fists, standing his ground. "You hear me? I'm done running. I'm done letting you control me." The laughter stopped. The room fell silent. And then, a voice whispered from behind him, so close he could feel the cold breath on his neck. "You'll never be free." Alex spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room, the broken laptop, and his reflection in the darkened window. Except it wasn't his reflection. It stared back at him, grinning with hollow eyes that burned like fire. Alex's scream echoed into the night, but outside his window, the world remained oblivious. The next morning, Alex's apartment was quiet. The neighbors would later mention how strange it was that they hadn't seen him leave for days. When the landlord eventually entered, the place was empty, the air thick with an unexplainable chill. On the desk sat Alex's laptop, open and glowing faintly. The screen displayed a single message: "I'm still here." And with that, the story ends, leaving the darkness lingering, ready to find its next victim.